In this episode, Emily Manley, career and interview coach from Relaunch Me, interviews Perry Adolphus, who has had a successful career as a personal trainer and is the owner of Melbourne-based personal training business, Longevity Through Wellness. Emily and Perry discuss Perry's career journey from personal training to software sales and back again, the pros and cons of running a personal training business, and Perry also shares his advice for others interested in building a career in personal training. Enjoy the interview. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do.
Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I'm Emily Manley and my guest today is Perry Adolphus. Perry has had a really interesting career. He has worked as a dancer, as a gym instructor, he's worked in mining, sales, he's come back full circle and is now working as a personal trainer where his passion lies in health and fitness. So really interested to talk to Perry today about his journey and his different experiences, particularly around, going and doing some time as a FIFO, so having the fly in, fly out lifestyle and how that suited, and also just how he's managed to come back and start his own business in personal training. So welcome, Perry.
Thanks for having me, Emily. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. So I like to start all my interviews, Perry, by asking, when you're at a barbecue and somebody says to you, what is it about your job that you enjoy, once you tell them what you do, or whether you like your role, how you would answer that question?
Look, I think one of the things I've learned over the 17 years of on and off being involved with the health and fitness industry, both here in Australia and overseas, is that it really is, and I know there's a lot of industries out there that say you have to be passionate about it, you have to be passionate about it. You can kind of relate that to anything in life, really. If you're going to be successful at it, you need to be passionate about it. But health and fitness is really one of those industries which, you seriously need to be passionate about your training and about training other people. So I guess for me, keeping that passion burning, keeping that passion alive is probably one of the most challenging things. But because it's been something that I've been that's been instilled in me, that I've valued and held in high regard from a very, very early age, I think it's something that comes naturally to me. It is a part of who I am, really. So
on that, Perry, if you take me back, way back when, how was the fire kind of first ignited for you in terms of that health and wellbeing and fitness?
Yeah. Look, I think the inspiration for me came from a very early age. I used to play a lot of sport growing up. Back in the 70s and 80s, we were an ethnic family. We immigrated to Australia in 73. And there was a lot of, dare I say, bullying, not only at school but also on the sporting field. And I realised at a very young age that it was an outlet for me to, I guess, sort of vent and somewhat, it was an arena for me to succeed in, and I made sure that I did succeed. And I think that's where my competitive spirit came from, wanting to constantly better myself, or constantly be better than my teammate, or constantly better than the opposing team, because it was team sports at that time. It wasn't a solo career. And I think it also came from my parents. The dancing inspiration certainly came from them. There's a few entertainers in our family, and I remember Mum and Dad clearly used to position me on their feet in the lounge room and just sort of whisk me around the lounge room whilst they danced to their old music. So I think the whole, being in the moment when they were doing that, it was a really happy time, and I think those memories certainly stuck with me. And I knew how I felt when I, got off, not so much with dancing, but got off the field after playing a hard game of sport. Back then it was soccer. I used to play a little bit of football at school. I used to feel, it was probably the best part of the day for me. I guess I love the adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you said there was a bit of bullying back in the day, and obviously being ethnic, that can sometimes incite bullying, but I'd imagine adding dancing to that could be another reason for people to be, unkind or to pick on somebody.
Yeah, I think with the dancing, that started a little bit later in life. I was probably around 17, 18, so I just finished high school.
Yep.
It was more, in fact, having said that, there was a little bit of, not a little bit, there was a lot of breakdancing going on back in the 80s when I was in primary school. And it was something that I really loved doing. But the dancing kind of really took off, I think, professionally for me when I was around 18, 19. It was after high school.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of the bullying had finished. I think most of that bullying had sort of taken place when I was on the sporting field in my teenage years. Yeah.
Okay. So then you moved into dancing, was that more of a hobby or a side interest before you started making it a more professional interest?
It was more of a side interest, Emily, and it just took off. There was a little bit of a spark there, and a bit of interest from my cousin who was quite a prominent female vocalist in the Perth music industry, and we started doing some shows and with her, and it sort of took off from there. Started off in nightclub cabaret shows and performances, and then that led to dance competitions, and that led to travel, that led to TV and stage show performances and spot shows. So yeah.
Okay, so that would have required you to obviously always, I guess, value fitness and have to look after your body. If you were doing that in a professional capacity, there would have been a need to make sure that obviously your body was paying you a paycheck, so it was going to be important for you to look after that.
Absolutely.
How did that end up for you in terms of moving out of that dancing?
One of the prizes for one of the dance competitions was an annual membership to Renaissance Health Club back in Perth back in early 90s, and that was my first real. I'd thrown a few weight dumbbells around in a mate's place in the backyard before, but most of the training, most of the physicality behind dancing came from the technical training. It was a lot more explosive, a lot more aerobic. So all of that fitness you gained from dancing itself and going through the routines and taking yourself through the movements. You needed to be supple, you needed to be flexible. My strength and conditioning, my love of strength training really came with that prize that we won in the dance competition, because that was really the first time that I hit the gym and started taking it seriously. As a young, still developing young man, you tend to put on muscle pretty quickly, and I realised it was something that I enjoyed the feeling of. So that was it. I was hooked after that, Emily.
Yeah, well, a lot of people seem to get hooked on that. But I think it's one thing to train yourself, obviously, and, keep yourself fit and well, but probably quite another to do that for groups of people or other individuals who might not have the same levels of motivation that you yourself have. So what led you then going from, feeling the love of training and really realising that, this was something that you really enjoyed doing? How did you then transition into more of a paid gym instructor role?
At the time, I was entertaining the thought of leaving Perth and moving over to Melbourne. I'd come over to Melbourne for a holiday, and I swore to myself that I would return back here to live. I just loved it over here. I felt more of a connection with the city of Melbourne than I did at Perth at the time. I was at that stage where I was still living with my parents, and I think I needed to fly the coop. I needed to spread my wings, as they say. I had a friend of mine. I got quite friendly with one of the trainers who used to train me every now and again at that gym in Perth that I had my first membership at. And he actually put the idea in my head. He said, I think you'd be fantastic at this. You're great with people. You know how to talk to people. You're very vibrant. Why don't you give it a go? Why don't you move into aerobics? Why don't you just go out when you get to Melbourne and get your certification? You can use that. You'll be choreographing. You'll be moving. you'll be leading groups of people and you'll be getting paid for it. Seemed like a good idea. So that's what I did when I got to Melbourne.
So was there a qualification needed for that at the time?
Yeah, there certainly was. Back then, I was asked to do a couple of guest classes because of that profile that I'd actually built in Perth as a dancer, and people wanted me to come in and work at their gym and just do some spot classes. That sort of stuff wouldn't be allowed nowadays, I don't think. You need to be certified and rubber stamped and all that sort of stuff. But there is a certification, and I actually sat that certification over at Holmes Glen Tate. I did what's now the equivalent of Cert 3 and 4 of fitness, but it was an exercise for music module. I then went back later on and did my personal training certification. That was the first part of study. I mean, that's not the only study that I've actually done in the area of personal training, but that was certainly one of the very first early qualifications that I've taken myself through.
Okay. So at that point, there was a time when you did step out of it and you went and did something different. So tell our listeners what was your thought process around that decision? Why did you step out of fitness and gym instructing to go and do something quite different?
If I'm to be completely honest, it was the money. The prospect of earning more money was, and a new challenge. My mindset, and I remember it well, was I can still continue to work, and it was basically in sales, in particular in online sales. Back then, the internet was blowing up, and again, another friend of mine said, "I think you'd be fantastic at it. I think you'd be able to earn a lot of commission. You can still do your fitness stuff on the side in the evenings." And I started my career in sales with that mindset to just keep my finger in the pulse and just continue to take classes after hours. But working for a corporate, I mean, it really is a full-time job, and there's a lot of socialising, and it was probably the furthest I've ever been away from fitness, especially with the after work drinks and having to entertain clients, and getting to the gym was proving to be quite difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, any kind of sales role, I think, you do have that, that responsibility to wine and dine and booze and schmooze. It sort of comes with the territory a bit, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it's not all that well aligned to health and fitness. So we describe that as kind of a portfolio career. So that's what we talk to our clients about, having a job that serves you and gives you a good paycheck, for example, and then sort of having your passion project or your side hustle, which, obviously some people can maintain, and it depends on the type of work that you're doing. So with personal training, did you feel it was a little bit too difficult to fit that in around a full-time job?
Yeah, I think it was more the time, restrictions around that. A lot of the work that I had to do was obviously props to various agencies, interactive agencies, and it was a salary job, and we were getting paid pretty good money at the time for the sort of mid to late 90s. I worked for a company. First company was Oz Email. Then I moved over to BMC Media, which basically represented websites who wanted to stimulate some advertising revenue through their particular websites. And then from there, I ended up at a company called Wishlist. I don't know if you ever remember them early.
Yeah, I do. They were quite big, weren't they?
They were. So e-commerce site.
Could have been quite a good kind of launching pad for you in terms of, bringing, if you wanted to grow your career that way, that could have been quite a good opportunity for you to do so. So how did you determine, whether to go down that path or to try something else?
From there, Emily, I'd always had in the back burner this driving passion to get an overseas experience, which I did, and I got myself a 2.5 year work visa to go and live and work in the United Kingdom. And because I was working in a sales role prior to me, up to the day 2 days before I left, I found it easier as my last role to actually pursue a career or pursue my first job in London in that particular field. I worked for a software company doing sales, and just sort of fell into that, but realised that the health and fitness industry was calling me back. One of the very first things I did when I got to London was join a gym. Started talking to a couple of the trainers and realised that it was, where I needed to be. In fact, two of the trainers that I got friendly with were from New Zealand and from Australia, which is not an uncommon thing in the UK. It's sort of dominated by the anti-Padan community, the South Africans, the Kiwis and the Australians. So I felt a bit of an affinity and a bit of a duty to end up back in that role, because it was like, well, there were so many other Aussies out there who were doing it over in London. Some good money to be made over there.
So there's probably some quite similar skills and strengths that you'd need in personal training, to say sales or online sales and that sort of thing. Things like relationship building and, people skills, and probably having a bit of grit. So I can certainly see some alignment between the two. But what was the clincher in terms of, I really need to get back to personal training? Was it the sitting at a desk? You probably get out a little bit in sales, but, you're probably sitting at a desk for a large portion of the day. Or was it the fact that, you had budgets that you had to meet? I'd assume you have that too with personal training. So what were the things that stood out to you that made you think, this is not for me? I definitely need to go back to the personal training.
I wanted to be around health and fitness. I knew how it was, I knew how it made me feel when I was around it. And London was a hard place to really find your feet in. And I needed to do it. I think if I was to have any sort of longevity in London, and people always used to tell me this who had been to London, if you can last 6 months there, you can stay there. It's the first 6 months that really get to you, because it's such a culture shock. It was so different to being back home. And I just found myself just having, first of all, it was the commute to my sales job, first of all. Second of all, it was the prospect of getting a job just around the corner from where I live, which is where the gym was. And it was also the feeling. It was really that passion. It was, okay, what's going to keep me here in London? What can I see? What can I do? And I thought it'd be a fantastic place to work for myself and earn some good money and get some really good experience. It certainly was obviously being a very cold, grey city at the best of times. That feeling of sitting at a desk for me, I was learning about myself more and more and more. And, to know thyself is to, I guess that's the first step in honouring sort of what your strengths are. My strength wasn't sitting in an office. It still isn't now today.
And were you thinking about that as a long-term move when you were going through that process of deciding to step out of the sales role and back into PT? Was that, was there a process of you sort of sitting down and thinking to yourself, well, where can I see myself in 5 or 10 years? It sounds a bit cliche, or was it more of I just really need, I'm in London for a short time and a good time, and there's a gym down the road, and I'm going to do that, and it's what I love doing, and see where it goes? Or was it, so how considered, I suppose, was that decision?
I think the early conversations that I'd had when I got to London really embedded that in the back of my head, that as a personal trainer, you could have a really, really successful business, and, you could be, because I knew some trainers who were, in my opinion, pretty average trainers and who were really, really busy. Okay. So I wanted to get some overseas experience, and I guess you could say it was slightly calculated, because knowing I could head back with an overseas experience as a trainer on my CV was very, very attractive.
It sounds like a real crossroads moment, or a sliding doors moment, I suppose. Like software sales, obviously that is a career that you can be very successful in, and there's a lot of businesses now that need that sort of professional position in their business. Technology is obviously a growth area. And, I guess for you it could have been, that moment of, well, do I pursue this? Do I go down this road or that road? And what do they both look like? And sometimes I think, the universe can intervene. I'm a bit of a fatalist like that. And I think, sometimes it can be a matter of there's a gym down the end of the road. It's sort of calling me. I'm going to go and chat to them. Or it can be a much more sort of thought through process.
Yeah, look, I think there certainly was a little bit of both happening, Emily.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I actually didn't end up getting any hours at that gym at the end of the road because I actually moved up a little bit closer to central London, and that's where I sort of kick-started my entry into a franchise health club. At the time it was Holmes Place, which were bought out by Virgin Active. I actually got in selling memberships. So I, again, leveraged off and they had a salesperson, a membership salesperson consultant's role going. That was really close to home. That was a bus ride away from, I was living in Marylebone at the time. And that was a bus ride away. It was in Regent's Park, the first gym that I worked at over there. And I was selling memberships and also doing a gym shift on a Sunday. Yeah, so I started off 4 days a week membership sales, and then I had a break, and then I worked on a Sunday on their gym floor.
Okay, all right. So you stayed in London working in a gym for the whole time you were there?
Yeah. Pretty much most, yeah.
And what happened after that?
So I started working at a club which was a personal training health club. So you could, I think, if I can give you a percentage, I'd say 80% of the members there had personal trainers, and the members were allowed to go back in and use the gym for a small fee, a membership fee. So it was really mostly a personal training club, and I was quite lucky to, again, through a friend of mine, he invited me to come and have a look at the place, and they were actually looking to fill the spot of a trainer that was actually leaving. So I got the position there. I recruited a lot of his clients that he'd left. He was actually moving back to rural countryside UK. I recruited a lot of his clients and just had to sort of hit the ground running. And that's really where the freelance personal training really kicked off. So I basically worked for myself, but I would actually need to pay a certain percentage to the club. From there, that club closed down, unfortunately. They were really good days. We were all very, very sad. But then 3 of us went out on our own and got our own studio around the same place in St John's Wood. If you know the geography of London, it's a very affluent area. And so we set up a little personal training studio, and were fortunate enough to be in an area where a lot of celebrities lived and had I myself, Gwyneth Paltrow, trained her on and off sort of a couple of times over a couple of years, I should say. Jude Law and Chris Isaac.
No pressure. There's some pretty big names there.
Look, it was. Gwen Stefani, Madonna came in a couple of times. So it was just we were really, really lucky to have a existing client within the little group of 3 that took the studio space over. He was a property developer. He had a lot of property in the area, gave us a space very, very cheap, and we just moved some equipment in there. Yeah. And we were just convenient. We were just lucky. It was a very, very...
It sounds like the ideal start to a personal training career. I think, many people wouldn't be so fortunate to have that kind of sweet start that you had. That's amazing. So no wonder you sort of a love for it was born at that time.
I think the love of it came from very early when I started in Melbourne, though.
Okay, so what happened after your London stint then?
So left London. I had another overseas experience in India. I had quite an affluent client, Indian lady, whose nephew ran a franchise over in India, in Delhi, a gym franchise. And he wanted me to come over and just do a little bit of consulting and working with the trainers, working with the sales staff. And I was there for 3 months.
That would have been an interesting experience.
It was actually. It was. He paid me a small little wage and paid for my accommodation. It was really more about, I guess, stopping off somewhere and, if I could the fact that I used my skill set and was getting paid for it was just an added bonus. Right, so that was a great experience. And then I head back to my home of Perth, and I started working in a gym after about a month and a half of being home. And I worked in membership sales and moved into personal training, did both, sort of leveraged off both skill sets. And then I got an opportunity to move up north and work and subcontract to BHP as a personal trainer to run all of their return to work programs, working in conjunction with the physiotherapist, doing their group fitness classes for the employees on site.
Okay, so I'd imagine that would be quite a different experience to your previous personal training experiences where you were more in those smaller groups or one-on-ones, and obviously not part of a big corporate organisation where there's quite a bit of policy and procedure that you probably needed to follow. What did you see as the key differences in working in that sort of setting?
Yeah, look, the temperature, the conditions, the climate, that was one of them.
Pretty steamy.
It was like nothing I'd ever experienced, Emily, to be honest with you.
What are we talking, like temperature-wise?
Oh, look, the AC was always on.
You'd have to.
It would get up to 46, 47.
Wow.
Obviously, it wasn't like that in the gym. I mean, we're talking a state-of-the-art gym on site with all your bells and whistles, so you had a lot of air conditioning. But, just kind of, sleeping in dongers, small dongers, single bed, that was your room with a little bathroom, little kitchenette, which was hardly ever used because all your food was provided for. So I guess the environmental conditions were the big difference.
Big changes.
You had to be very motivated at a very, very early hour of the morning because people wanted to get in and have their personal training sessions before their shift started, and their shift starts at 6 o'clock. So you can just imagine what time we were waking up. So it was a 4:30 start. I mean, any personal trainer will tell you that they're always busy in the morning and in the evening. I was never getting up at 4:30 in the morning. That's for certain in my previous personal training.
Yeah. Okay. And was that so it's an opt-in thing where they could choose to come and see you? They opt into it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you got fairly good take up.
Yeah. No, there was. I mean, it was incredible how committed. You used to see that. I guess you got two types of people. You get the people who like to stay fit and healthy, and then you get the people up there who like to drink and socialise. So you used to see and build up relationships with some very familiar faces. So you used to see the same people quite a lot. And, having a resource like a personal trainer on site, just to ask questions to and to motivate you and to give you a little bit of guidance and professional direction. And also continue on, when they're on site so they don't have that lag in fitness and sort of drop in health when they're on site, which is very, very easy to do.
So would that be a fairly unique situation, having a personal trainer as part of the team in a corporation like that? I mean, I'd imagine obviously they're being conscious of their workers who are working FIFO and are working in tough conditions and who need to maintain a sense of well-being and, that positive mental health. But is that something, are there those sort of opportunities in other corporates, say in Melbourne?
Yeah, there are, definitely. I know that for a client of mine, he actually works out for Mercedes trucks, and he was telling me that they've actually got a gym downstairs, which the employees have access to, and that particular gym is manned by a trainer 4 days a week.
Okay.
So I know that there is definitely companies out there who are providing that resource. Now, certain companies will subsidise that role. I don't think there's too many companies now that would be paying for a live-in trainer or have them on the payroll. But I do think a lot of companies will invest in their employees and say subsidise 100% of a trainer coming in. So you would operate your business completely autonomously to the corporate, and then you would hire by the corporate to come in and train them once, twice, 3 times a week, whatever their budget would allow.
Yep. Yep. So I think, it's probably the landscape has probably changed a bit over the time that you've been involved in personal training and in health and fitness quite significantly, I'd imagine. I mean, the fundamentals are no doubt the same. But what are your insights in terms of how it's changed, to where it is today and, in terms of the demand for it and I guess the place for personal training in today's society? What would you say about that?
I couldn't believe the number when I did return back to Melbourne after living in Perth and working in the mining industry. I just could not believe how many personal training studios had popped up in relation to the last time I lived in Melbourne. So I left Melbourne in 2000 to go overseas. I was away for 9.5 years. Went back to Perth, came back to Melbourne in 2016. It was just an explosion. And that was indicative of how health and fitness, training, the gym, the priority that people are now giving to staying healthy and fit is at an all-time high. And you only have to look at the number of personal trainers out there, for example, this crazy period that we've all gone through. When I look around, I run a lot of outdoor stuff. I've been running a lot of outdoor stuff during this lockdown period at Elwood Park. Every morning I would come across at least 6 trainers just in the area. And Elwood Park's a big area. It's a big oval. It probably consists of 2 ovals. The oval that I work out of, there would be at least 6 trainers working down there at any one time.
So, yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, isn't it? But it's so interesting to think about, the progression of it over time and how it has got so popular and it's become such a priority for people. And I just wonder, and you might have insights as well, but I feel that it's probably because we're now so sedentary in our roles, in our jobs generally, and I guess just modern society and modern life and the pressures it puts on people, it's almost just become a necessity to do some kind of active fitness-related program.
Absolutely.
Sanity.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's no surprises. I think it's something that we've known all along. And getting back to sort of my catalyst for at a very early age, I knew how it made me feel. Plenty of case studies out there to support the physiological and psychological link between the two, mind, body. Get back to your last question, how's the landscape changed? I think back in the 90s it was, drop and give me 20, that sort of mentality, and, go hard, go fast, and what do you mean you can't push through? That sort of mentality is certainly dissipated. I know certainly for me it's more sort of companion, a bit more of a softer approach. The mentality, and this is through, science is always evolving, isn't it? What we knew about the coronavirus now wasn't what we knew 2 months ago. Same thing with, training methods and training principles. And I always say this, and it's a little bit cliche because I say it a lot, better for a client to turn up 100% of the time and give me 60% than turn up 60% of the time and give me 110.
That's something I have learnt probably the hard way over the years, I think. Consistency hasn't always been something that it hasn't been my strong suit, but I have realised probably over the last 4 or 5 years that is number one, even if you just move in some gentle way, as long as you're moving every day.
Emily, it's that cumulative compounding benefit that exercise has to everyone. Softly, gently, then you can start to take larger steps. But it's that if you can, I always try to impress upon my clients, if you can fall in love and commit to the process, the results come. And that's probably the reason why I continue to do it today. It's falling in love with the process, being committed to the process.
But I'd imagine you would have many clients who aren't able to commit at that level, or, who are inconsistent. And for you, knowing how that's going to impact their results, that must be quite frustrating. And I'd imagine for personal trainers, that might be something that comes with the territory. There are going to be those clients that, frustrate you no end because you can see that commitment's not there. I presume you've got strategies to help people like that, but how do you deal with those sort of challenges that no doubt come up all the time?
As I've matured in years, I realise that, some movement is always better than none. And I've also realised that people have, you know, I guess not being so idealistic and being fixated on the end game, as in the result, but trying to coach them and walk alongside them as they go through the process. Just gently reminding them, and you've got to be able to have the, I guess, the skill set of being able to judge. Certain times you don't pick up a hammer. Certain times you need to pick up a screwdriver with certain people. Okay, it all depends on the personality. You've got to figure out what strategy works with what client. Sometimes clients just need to hear the truth, the brutal truth, and other clients just a little gentle reminder. Like, well, you do know that if you threw in an extra session on a weekly basis, for example, that you probably would see results a little bit sooner, which would actually motivate you a little bit more, and that would actually make it hurt a little less.
Well, I guess so much of it is, that sort of intrinsic, reaching a point where they've got that intrinsic motivation to keep coming.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that, like you said, it's a cumulative thing. It doesn't happen after a couple of weeks. It might happen after a few months. But having the patience to wait to see that kind of arrive could be tough.
Yeah. That is something that has I've struggled with in the past. I've been very, very idealistic, especially as a younger man. And as now I'm sort of pushing our sort of my 17th, 18th year in this industry, on and off, it's certainly something that is now coming a little bit more, it's a little bit more readily available for me now, Emily.
Behaviour is just such a complex thing, isn't it? Behaviour is so complex, and it's all about psychology, and people's psychology is so individual. Yeah. So from that point of view, and I think you'd have to have some understanding of that as a PT, but also, be able to, like you said, I guess, have a personal approach depending on the client you're seeing, not necessarily just assuming that everybody's motivated by the same things.
It's definitely something that I've gotten better at. And that is always it is a frustration because, you want to see, it's an extension of you, right, that result. A result with a client is an extension of how well you do your job.
And it's so much of it's out of your control, so that would be hard.
Absolutely. I can only provide the roadmap. They ultimately have to get in the car and push the accelerator. And I say this to people all the time. Food is a big one.
So how much on that, as a PT, just for the benefit of our listeners, how much knowledge do you need to have around nutrition?
Me personally, if you're asking me personally, I certainly haven't studied nutrition at a tertiary level. I've done a couple of courses, one by Precision Nutrition, which is a very popular American provider of nutritional coaching. And I feel that I've done enough in order to be able to sit down and consult like this on a screen, talk people through. I certainly would recommend, I know it's outside of our scope of practice, as in our insurance and our liability, to sit down and write meal plans. We're not covered for it. And if you are doing that, your premium on that personal indemnity goes up.
Okay. Yeah.
So that you can get into a lot of trouble sitting down and actually saying, eat this, don't eat that. It's a very, very fine line. The knowledge and the information that I share is knowledge and information that I've acquired, yes, through my technical training, but also stuff that I'm doing myself. I know what works for me, and I can speak from a place of authenticity, certainly experience, as to what works for me.
Yeah.
We all know that eating too much processed sugar is not a good thing. There's a lot of, if you don't believe me, you can go out and do your research, however it is that you want to do that, to support that. I would say that I help my clients assist them in making and reinforce them making the right decisions as to what works for them. I will always preface my conversation with I know what works for me, and I know what I really enjoy the taste of. We'll workshop it. We'll talk about what we've eaten on the weekend. For example, Mother's Day. Did a beautiful Mother's Day hamper picnic in our lounge room for Tessie, and there was a lot of buffalo mozzarella and gorgonzola and beautiful smoked. There was something else. There was dip. There was a lot of breadstick. There was all this really, really beautiful stuff. But I can tell you now that Monday I was paying for it. Okay. Now I would share that information with my client. Now, does that mean that that's bad for all people? Probably not. Certain bodies might cope well with that, might be able to have a restful night's sleep on the Sunday night. Tess and I certainly didn't. We paid for it on Monday.
For personal trainers or budding personal trainers, I suppose, I mean, I see a lot of people who want to move into the area of personal training, and they tend to be people who are either super fit and healthy themselves and have just a genuine love for fitness and wellness as you do. Do you think that is a prerequisite for being a personal trainer? Do you need to have that real love for health and fitness, or can you just be a real relationships person? You see the benefit of fitness, you do enjoy being reasonably fit yourself, but you're not totally obsessed. Like, it doesn't matter necessarily if you're not totally ripped like you are, Perry.
Oh, look, Emma. Look, it doesn't. No, I actually don't feel that that's a necessity. Like I said, the trainer today, there's a few stereotypes that a trainer can fill. Okay. The drop and give me 20 big muscle-bound guy or girl certainly isn't. Having said that, there are a lot of people who are driven by it. Now, I always believe, it's a case of water finds its own level with personal trainers and clients. I believe you end up with the clients that you have, and the clients stick with you for very, very good reasons, is because there's a connection there. I can tell you now that I used to train a lot of younger people when I was a lot younger. I was a lot musclier. That's but nowadays I train people who are generally between 35 to 55 years old. Okay. I would probably even push that up as high as, say, now sort of 40 to 55. And that's because I've seasoned in years. But I think, to answer your question, you don't need to be ripped, muscular and super fit. You do need to be relatively good with people and relatively adaptable, understanding what it's like to train, okay, understanding what fatigue is, understanding what it's like to want to give up in a set, understanding what your mental thoughts are to drive yourself to keep going. I would say that is a must, because that's a conversation piece. It's the difference between a young trainer who hasn't had many years on the floor, hasn't made many mistakes, who's super fit. It's the difference between him getting a 35 to 40-year-old client who is a parent who works 10 hours a day and not getting that client. I'm pretty sure that if it was a toss-up between me and that client, I would get that client, and that guy would probably miss out. The only reason being, he probably looks better than me, he's probably fitter than me, but I understand because of what it's like to be in that position and be tired. I can draw upon my thoughts and use my thoughts as a bit of a feedback loop.
Well, like you said, the relationship is the core of, of the success probably. And I think you do want to feel some kind of common ground with your trainer, I'd imagine. I've never had a trainer. But I'd imagine that you would need to have that common ground and to feel like you said, to feel understood, I suppose, in terms of where you're at your life stage and the pressures and the motivations.
Yeah, absolutely. Common ground and respect, respect for what, the personal trainer is doing. And also it's got to be a mutual respect, a symbiotic relationship there.
And I'd imagine you would need as well some business sense. I mean, most personal trainers, yourself included, have their own businesses. Would you say you can be successful working for someone else, or do you feel most trainers do have their own clients, go out on their own, have their own business?
I think going out by yourself seems to be the logical extension of leaving a gym, or still continuing to work for a gym, because a lot of gyms actually offer the rental facility fee, and then eventually, I guess for a lot of trainers, the end game is for them to start their own gym.
So, do you see it continuing to grow? Do you think it is an area that is just going to keep moving? Keep growing? There's still going to be plenty of demand for it. I mean, there seems to be so many health and wellness professionals popping up all over the place. with different offerings. PT doesn't seem to have gone away. It's always been there, and it seems like a very reliable way of staying fit.
I think it will grow. I think the way personal trainers, especially after this period that we're going through in our lives, the COVID-19 lockdown period, I think I've certainly had to change the way I do business. I think a lot more people, I think it's great to see this many people outside exercising, and I think the concept of exercise is probably a little bit more attractive to those people who weren't exercising before, because they've realised that, movement is really, really important for well-being, mental health. So I think from that perspective, Emily, I think it will continue to grow, but I think the way we operate will definitely change. I think there'll be a lot less face-to-face stuff going on. I think people who love working and training in groups will continue to go out in groups. In fact, this Saturday I know there's 9 of my clients who are very, very excited, who are sitting there rubbing their hands in anticipation for Saturday.
Yeah, well, it is very different training in a group. There's something social that you get from that you don't get when you're at home doing it on a screen. I mean, those personal training programs that seem to be so popular, like your Sam Wood and Michelle Bridger, or all those celebrities who have their own training apps and so forth. I mean, how much of a threat is that to personal trainers who are coming through the ranks now?
I've always had a saying, Emily. I think there's always room to do something properly in Melbourne. Whatever you're doing, I mean, how many restaurants are out there making coffees?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Everybody needs it. I mean, and like you said, it is becoming more and more of a priority for people.
It gets back to the relationship. I think if you offer a good service, offer an honest service, I'd like to believe, in fact, I think the numbers probably indicate that I do offer an authentic, solid service. Not only during this COVID period have I survived, but I've actually thrived. I wanted to, in the early days when this all started, I wanted to apply for the government, the JobKeeper.
Yep.
But I couldn't justify a 30% drop in my earnings.
Well, that's a good position to be in. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So if there are others out there, well, all the people out there who are considering this sort of career, what sort of advice would you give to them?
Be patient. Get into it for the right reasons, not because you're a super fit person, but because you genuinely want to work with a person and be a catalyst for transformation in their life, and just back yourself. Don't get into it. I mean, do not get into it for money. That's for certain.
Yeah.
You've got to do it because you love what you do. And I will still continue to say that, for the first 5 minutes of the day, it's like any other job for me when I'm waking up at 5:30 in the morning. But as soon as I get into that car, I'm so happy to be going to work.
How wonderful. And that's a rare thing. You're so lucky to have that. So do you feel that with PT clients, they generally do want to see you, I assume, at the end of the day or at the start of the day? So the middle of the day, do you generally have free? Is that how it works? Or do you have other? Yeah, so,
you spend that time generally doing a lot of admin, a lot of your programs. You're constantly feeding your body. I do, and or you're training yourself. So I would generally finish my sessions or roster my next client with enough time to actually train myself, and then move into, say, another 2 subsequent sessions after that. Go home, eat, do your admin. Definitely have some downtime. I think I've lasted this long because I've mastered the art of napping. And then, obviously being a parent, it's been an interesting time, as a PT during this COVID-19 period, lockdown period, because now the day consists of sitting down when my wife's not at home and doing homeschooling. Yeah, so look, you're still trying to sort of factor in that downtime too during the middle of the day, which is really, really important, then back out again in the evenings.
So you feel like you've obviously found your thing, you're in your sweet spot. What happens in 20 years' time when maybe your body starts to fail you a bit? Have you got a long-term plan?
Look, I won't lie to you, Emily. It's certainly something that I have been thinking of during this period. something a little bit more I guess when I say consistent, my hours are certainly consistent. I'm certainly doing enough hours in personal training and earning, making money that, you know, we're happy with as a family. But I won't lie to you, there is definitely plans for a career change on the horizon.
Okay.
Purely based on what you've said, because of I guess, you know, I've looked after the rig for a certain amount of time and will continue to do so, I think, for as long as I live, because I understand the mental benefits that come from that, strong body, strong mind. But it's certainly, yes, it's definitely something that I'm entertaining at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you know where to come.
Yes.
Now, before I finish up, Perry, I just want to, I guess, give you the opportunity to give your business a little plug, because I know from speaking to various people who have been trained by you that you're obviously amazing at what you do. So can you just let our listeners know just a little bit about what your business is and perhaps how to get in contact?
Yeah, sure. I think the best way to contact me is through my Facebook page or Instagram. My trading name is Longevity Through Wellness. I operate around the Elwood, Elstonwick, Balaclava, Brighton, St Kilda area. I do run outdoor groups. I am available for personal training. I actually operate out of a small personal training studio in Balaclava. And, I specialise I also do a lot of rehab stuff, work in conjunction with chiropractors and physios and so forth, doing, rehabilitation. I do a lot of foundational fitness stuff. A lot of if I could just sort of explain my style of training, I'm sort of where Pilates meets strength and conditioning. I also do sort of higher intensity stuff. I do a little less of that these days, cardio conditioning, but my passion, I would say, would be strength and conditioning.
Okay.
So if you're looking to get strong and, put on a little bit of muscle and, improve your posture, then I'm your guy. I'd love to hear from you.
I don't know many people who don't want to do that. So that's fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time today to chat with me, Perry. It's been so good. And I think there are so many people who, will find this beneficial. A lot of people we speak with do have an interest in personal training, but I think even just generally for people to have an understanding about the industry is really helpful. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Thanks so much for having me, Emily. It's an absolute pleasure. Wonderful to chat. Thanks again. No worries. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.